So I'll introduce myself. My name's Kevin Lawson. I'm a registered professional engineer. I've got about 12 years of experience in the MEP consulting industry. I didn't get into Revit until kind of late in my career, but once I did, I realized the potential right away, and I just started digging in. I founded Ripple about a year ago. Released my first product, which is the Ripple Loads Toolkit. This will be the second product, which is the automated diffuser selection and layout tool. They work together well, but they don't have to. So if you have a different way of running loads, you can still use the diffuser layout tool. You just have to get your spaces in and your airflows in, and we'll go over that in a little bit. And the reason the diffuser selection tool is the second product is because after loads, diffuser selections and layout is one of the most tedious and time-consuming tasks in mechanical or in HVAC engineering. Yet, I'm sure you guys have all done this. You go grab a catalog. It's 7,000 pages long. It's got 10-point font in it, and you're looking through it, trying to keep the space CFM in your head, trying to keep the space shape in your head, trying to keep all this information in your head while going through way too much data. So I kind of said, like, why am I taking, all of the information I need to lay out diffusers is in the model. Why am I taking that information out of the model and going to a paper catalog? That's backwards. The information in the paper catalog should come into the model. That way I could start to automate this diffuser selection and layout process. And that's what this tool does. And that's what I'm going to demonstrate today. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. All right, so this is Revit, as I said. So the air terminal selection placement tool is going to come with the rest of the loads toolkit. So you've got a new tab, you got the loads toolkit. You can disregard this and just focus on the air terminal selection and placement tool. The key thing you have to be aware of is to use the diffuser selection tool. You have to have spaces placed, and you have to have your specified airflows set. So your specified supply airflow, your specified return airflow, and your specified exhaust airflow. So if you use the loads toolkit, those will all get set automatically based on the loads. But you could, if you're using a third-party loads program to do loads and get your CFMs, you could use one. There's many Excel import tools where you have to import these three values to get your layouts correct. If you're just coming up with that workflow, I would also suggest you import your design heating load and design cooling load, because that will set you up for the next task and the next automated tool that I'm working on now, which is automated VAV selections. So, while you're setting up that workflow, I would add those two in so you don't have to, change the workflow down the line. So I have all of my spaces placed, and I've got all of my CFMs assigned from the loads toolkit. And if you want to take a look at my YouTube channel, how I did that is all documented in a webinar there. So take a look at that. Or, if you've got your own workflow for loads, however you want to do it, you just have to have these three numbers in and your spaces placed. Because, the space gives the geometry to the tool, and the airflows give the airflow to the selection. So when you first open up the air terminal selection and placement tool, it's going to import some content, and it's going to import the families that the tool needs to lay out. It's going to import an air terminal tag so that you can tag those families. And it's going to import two schedules, an every instance schedule and a print schedule. Now, these are kind of guidelines. You can add to these, you can change these. The tag is probably not going to be what your company tag looks like, but you can modify it as you see fit. Same goes for the families and the schedules. The only caveat is you can add to them and you can modify the graphics and everything of them, but I don't change the name or the type names or the shared parameters that are on it, because that's what the tool uses to, link the catalog to an actual family that actually goes in your model. So you keep those things consistent and you should be good. But if you want to add or modify, especially the graphics, feel free to modify these however you see fit. So the way you are going to select the diffusers is through here. So you're going to go to your selections and you're going to get a drop down of, hey, what diffuser types do you want to lay out and what criteria do you want to select them by? So you can pick these by NC. Or you could also pick them by your total pressure. So if I want to do this by total pressure, you could do that here. If you don't want to select the diffuser size, you just do something to make it non-convertible to a number. So just type NA or X in the CFM and it won't select those sizes. So I typically don't select 14, 15, 16-inch diffuser necks because the plenum space gets tight and the turning radius on those gets too large. So I typically max out at a 12. Except for on like return selections, say I want a PDDR, no matter how much return I need in the room, I still want to put a 15-inch in there. So I, block out all the other sizes and I just have it select for the 15. On the other hand, exhaust, you do typically duct exhaust, so you would want, these smaller sizes to be put in, and the same, I don't want to put huge, flex duct in the ceiling. You do this for ceiling and no ceiling. So if the plugin finds a ceiling, it's going to drop these diffuser types in. If not, it's going to drop the no ceiling diffuser in. And this is very same kind of workflow. Now I'm going to let it go up to 14 because I typically have more room and ceiling spaces. Now on return, I typically don't put any return diffusers in where there are no ceilings. There's a transfer duct or a boot coming into the space or something. I don't actually need a diffuser for that, but I probably do want to duct the exhaust. So I've got those selected. Okay. So that is how you put the selection criteria for the diffusers, how you put that information in. And this is all coming straight from Price's catalog. So Price has an online selection software that when you change this, it calls their website and says, hey, what CFM do I get at a 17 NC? And it just looks that up right from their catalog. So this is going to match their catalog data perfectly. And if you get submittal data this detailed, it'll give you it'll match it all perfectly. And as far as I know, Price is the only manufacturer that has online selection software from that, and that's really what makes this all possible. Let's see. And then, so for the no ceilings, you also have an insertion height here. So at what height do you want the diffusers to go in? Because there's not a ceiling to know the height, so you got to tell it something feet and inches. You could adjust this after the fact, but it's nice to get in the ballpark on the first pass. So I'm gonna pop back in and see if I could look into the chat and see if you guys have any questions on this one here. Okay, great. So real quickly, just from from a couple of the questions. So these are the only diffuser types that work with the plugin. There's no way to do a custom custom database. So there, this is kind of hard coded in the back end. And so adding diffusers from your own custom databases is pretty tough. Now, if you want other price diffuser types in here, just shoot me an email and I'll see if I can get them in. Again, price is the only one with the online selection software, so it's got to be a price diffuser. Okay, so now we've got our selection criteria, our model types, and our CFM limits set. To lay the spaces out, you just select the space and you hit place air terminals. And what that's going to do is it's going to break the space down into rectangles and then address each rectangle separately. And it's going to proportion CFM based on the area. So like this little nook only needed 160 CFM, whereas this big area needed most of the CFM. So most of the CFM got assigned to this area, and so all these diffusers came up with 365 CFM. So it'll align your diffusers with your grid, whether it's a 2x2 grid or a 2x4 grid. If there is a grid, if it's like a wood ceiling or something like that, it'll just put them where they should be. It works on all angles, and you could, as long as the space is selected, it'll disregard everything else. You can select walls and everything else in the ceiling, and it will figure that out for you, align your diffusers to your grid and your ceiling. And even if there is no ceiling grid to tell the plugin, the orientation of the grid, it will still look at the orientation of the space, so it'll line those up properly too. So it didn't have a ceiling grid to look at, so it just lined it up with the orientation of the space. And the way it'll also handle rooms with curves. Although the more and more complicated the space gets, the less and less, I would say, kind of accurate it'll get. And if you get really complicated spaces snaking all over the place, it might just not put anything and say, hey, that's got to be done manually. So it's not going to get 100% of your spaces, but it's going to give you a really good start. So this is a pretty complicated space, tons of nooks and crannies, and it does an okay job here. You could select multiple spaces as you're going through. You could group spaces together. So there's a button here called add selected spaces. So it's going to add these spaces to the list. You could kind of look and see what the CFMs are on them without having to scroll through the properties bar. And then that's, say, this one. Let's add this space. And let's place these air terminals. And the way that this algorithm works is what was described in the paper that I emailed everyone before. And basically the gist of it is you lay a grid out in a simple pattern. So if I just have a rectangle space and I put one diffuser in the middle of the space, I've got a characteristic length of 10 feet, and I've got some throw on that diffuser. If I want to decrease the characteristic lengths, let's say in a perfectly rectangle space, I have to go to a 2x2 arrangement. So that goes characteristic length from 10 to 5. However, if you look at the throw data of typical diffuser types, the coverage area is linear with the CFM applied. So even though I've got less characteristic length, I've got less CFM per diffuser, which means I have less throw per diffuser. So typically 4 diffusers doesn't cover a space any better than 1 diffuser. Now that being said, if I don't have a perfectly rectangular space, I still want, the aspect ratio of the room to meet the aspect ratio of the diffuser layout as close as possible. So, you wouldn't want to start in a 20 by 40 room with just one diffuser. You'd want to start with two and then go from there. So if there's too much CFM for two diffusers to handle, you'd want to go to the next one. Now, to keep the characteristic length perfectly aligned, for this space, you'd have to go from 1 by 2 to 2 by 4. So you're going from 2 diffusers to 8 diffusers, and that's really excessive considering you're never going to have a perfect characteristic length. You're going to have curves and oddball aspect ratios of the rooms. You're never going to get them to match exactly. So what I do is I just add them as few diffusers as I can at a time until the CFM per diffuser gets under the CFM per the space. So go 2, 3, 4, 4, 6, 8. That way you get a good coverage of the space without having, way too many diffusers in there. So that's the gist of how this gets laid out. And that's, as you're looking at these spaces, that's what you see. And it really, to me, it looks like this is how I would typically lay them out, Anyway, so I think people do this kind of just naturally, and this is just how it ends up looking. The other thing you could do, so I'm going to go and I'm going to delete all these diffusers that I just laid out. And so this is level 2, level 3, and then level 1. There's no ceilings in level 1. But you could hit, depending on the workflow you want to pick up, you can hit select all spaces, select every space in the model, and then place the air terminals on that. Now this looks at every single space, breaks every single space down into its simpler components, selects the diffusers and places them. So it takes a couple minutes. But if you're laying diffusers out in a building this size manually, that may take a couple days, whereas this is just going to take a couple minutes. All right, so there we go. So this was all, the no ceiling diffusers, no return diffusers. Level 2, this is about what you would expect to see, laying out diffusers in a building like this. Again, it's not going to get everything perfectly, but the goal is to get most of your spaces done quickly and easily so you can focus on those difficult spaces, the atriums, the natatoriums, the things that really, require a lot more than just every office or classroom. Other good thing about this is now you can schedule all of these, and these all these diffusers come with a lot of good data attached to them. So you're going to get, so this is a schedule of every single diffuser in the model and all the data associated with it. So this is about 400 diffusers, and it's got the important data would be your noise criteria, your total pressure, and your throw for every single one. So that way you can keep track of these things as airflows change. So anytime you change an airflow, It's going to go up to the price API, say, hey, at 600 CFM, what is my NC? And price is going to say, hey, you've got an NC at 33, total pressure at 0.28. You might want to have another look at that. That might need to be 2 diffusers. You might want to delete all the diffusers in the space and relay them out, but you got to do something here because this is getting loud. And you could change the number at which this turns red just in the schedule properties to whatever you want. But I like 30 just to give me a, to give me an idea what's going on. The other great thing that the plugin does is it writes the host to the diffuser. So you know what the diffuser is hosted to. So like in this situation, it's the name of the ceiling family is a 2x2 ACT system, acoustical ceiling tile. So I can group, using this schedule, I can group the ceiling or the host that it's hosted to and not itemize every instance. And now this schedule will group what are all the different ceiling types I have diffusers hosted to in the project. So this helps me say, so on a gypsum wall board on metal stud, that ceiling type, I like to provide a land frame for those. So now I've got, 66 diffusers in a GWB ceiling. I'm going to type in lay-in frame here. And now I just put this accessory on all 66. So same thing with wood paneling. I've got a wood paneling ceiling. I don't know what finish the architect wants, but I'm sure it's going to be something. So right now I'm going to get in custom color, just so it gets on the schedule nice and quick. So maybe I need a lay-in frame for that too. I don't need to do anything special with the acoustic ceiling tile systems. So that's really helpful for the host. The other really helpful thing you could do is you could schedule the diffusers by the space type. So now if I group them by the space type, itemize every instance unchecked. Now it's going to tell me every single space type I have diffusers in. So I have 26 diffusers in a shower room. Now in shower rooms, I don't want a steel diffuser, I want an aluminum diffuser. So I'm going to put an aluminum in there. And now I've just changed that material on all of those diffusers to aluminum. Maybe you want to do it for toilet rooms too. Maybe you do aluminum for toilet rooms. We'll just change those really quickly. Now when I go back to itemize every instance, you can see, I added lay-in frames to the ones that needed lay-in frames. I changed the finish to custom. I made a lot of good changes just really quickly, not having to go through every single space and looking at the ceiling type. I just knew what they were. Now this is all well and good, but you would probably never print this schedule. You could, but for this to go on construction documents, this would take like pages and pages and pages of schedule sheets. So to get something more like what you're used to printing on a schedule, that's what the air terminal print schedule is for. So ideally what you would do is you would go here and you would sort and you would group and you would sort by every single parameter so you could get the unique combinations of each, so you could, designate A, B, C, D, or whatever to it. The problem is Revit out of the box only allows you to sort and group by, 4 parameters. So I could do manufacturer, model, service, next size, but then I would have different face sizes, different throw patterns, different materials, different finishes, all in those groups. So that is what the automatic schedule separator is for. So that's going to group all of your unique combinations of these things and give them a designation. So now I've got all of these broke out. So I've got 10 SPDs with aluminum white and 3 with aluminum custom lay-in frame. and it automatically gives a designation to it. And that way I could tag these things now. So from the tag, so all my return diffusers, since I only had one type selected, they all went in as the same thing. They all went in as 15-inch PDDR returns. So I'm going to select all instances in this view. And then I'm going to annotate tag all, only selected air terminal tags. And it comes with two tags. One is show airflow, one is show dash input airflow. So typically you don't want to show the airflow on the return because, there's no one's balancing that. Apply. So now it went through and it tagged all my diffusers. I'm going to move these off. Side. And now I could tag all. I could do show airflow and view. And now that tagged all of my diffusers with the designation that was assigned here. So again, I'm going to move these off. Here. And so now I've got designation, tags, CFM applied. The other good thing about this is it'll divide CFMs up into nice round numbers, and it's not going to give you 365.3333. It's going to give you nice round numbers that look good. Yeah, so that is tagging. Now, this is all well and good, but you're always going to have some sort of oddball diffuser out there. Every project's going to have something unique that you need to get tagged and scheduled. So what you used to have to do is you used to have to go through and manually add all the shared parameters to get your tags to work, to get your schedules to work. So if I drop in like an off-brand diffuser here, 9 feet. My tags aren't going to work with it. Because it doesn't have the shared parameters. And I'm not going to be able to add any of the data that I need to add to it because those parameters aren't on that, aren't on this family. So that is what the push shared parameters to all air terminals is for. So this is going to look at all the air terminals in the project and make sure that the right parameters are in it so that it works with your schedule. So now you can go back and say, this is going to be a supply. And you could add the parameters to make this work with your schedule. And that way, this schedule can work with whatever diffuser you have to do. Now, a lot of stuff is not going to be automatic. You're going to have to manually do it, but at least you can. At least you don't have to spend all that time uploading parameters, coordinating parameters. You just push a button and you could use it with anything. So that being said, let's take a closer look at these diffusers. So the diffusers that come with the tool, you can, change all kinds of stuff. So let's say something happens and this thing gets pushed, way off to the side, and you want to put a 3-way in here. So you can do that with here. So 4-way is 1, 3-way is 2. I'm going to change 2. It's going to automatically link, the arrows that are shown to the text pattern. And spacebar to rotate it. And that is automatically going to link to the schedule. So if I go to every instance here, I'll go and I'll see one throw pattern with a 3-way. So here's that one throw pattern that changed there. Same goes for size. If, maybe I've got like a bathroom or something like this is a little exhaust. I don't need a 2x2. So by by default, only 2x2s are going to get laid out. But let's say I go back and I say, hey, I'm going to put I want this space size to be, oh, let's say this one. Let's say I want this space size to be like a 12x12. So it's going to change the face size, and it's going to link it to the schedule. So this way, it forces what your schedule says to what your plans show. It forces those to be equal, because coordinating that stuff in CAD and Excel is a nightmare. It's that kind of stuff gets missed all the time. I'm looking for a 12x12 in here. It's in there somewhere. But you'll notice I changed a bunch of stuff, and now I don't have designations, the correct designations on. So just make sure before you put this on the schedule, you rerun the schedule separator. So that's going to redesignate everything. Now I got my 12x12 here. I've got my 3-way here. So it separated my, 10-inch 3-way from my 10-inch 4-way. And now that is forced to match the tag. Which all of this was just such a nightmare to coordinate before. So that's a really helpful feature. The last really helpful feature is the airflow check. So now that you've got, all your spaces in, you can check to make sure that your airflows match. So the actual airflow is the airflow, all the diffusers in the space, it adds them up live, and it compares it with the specified. So if I'm going through here and, one diffuser accidentally gets deleted, go back to my airflow check. Oh, I've got a problem here, and it highlights red because, hey, these don't match anymore. Now I just laid out diffusers automatically on all these, so everything's white. But since that one got deleted, this one's going to go red. So that's, get that back in there. And then now we're good. Now you'll notice that a bunch of my returns are not lining up, and they're all showing red. The reason for that is because we told the plugin not to put in returns. We said, whatever the return is, I don't care, for no ceilings, don't put any returns in. So if you go to these spaces, you're going to see, hey, I don't have any return diffusers in here, because probably I've got a transfer duct somewhere. So that's why those still show red. And then the other thing you'll see is that for return, they don't have to match exactly. I just have to make sure I have enough return in the space to at least accommodate the supply. So as you change diffuser CFM, and this is why you don't, this is why you show a dash instead of CFM. If this changes, I don't necessarily want it to warn me unless unless the supply goes above the total amount of return that I have in the space. It doesn't really matter. So returns are a little funny, but then again, exhausts are, they got to match equally for this to show white. And that's the tool. As I said, the most important groundwork to get laid out is to get your spaces in and to get your CFMs assigned to your spaces. Once you go from there, should just be clicking through, checking reasonableness and moving on. So get all these out of the way, and focus your time on those complex spaces that need more attention. Okay, I'm going to go through some questions here. Um, so for no ceilings, can you select a reference plane to host to? No. So it needs an architectural ceiling in the space to know what it's doing. So I know there's a lot of different ways people do that, but I decided because to actually line the diffuser up with the ceiling, you actually have to have a grid, so I just said, hey, let's host them to the ceilings, and that's the way they're going to go. Uh, so type 80, 85 return grills. Not yet. That's the most requested one that I've had so far, though. So that's something that will definitely get added as we continue to build this out. Jeremy, I think I answered your question. You could select all rooms in the project or multiple rooms. Duct mounted diffusers aren't supported yet. So, the goal is as the space gets more complicated, like natatorium, you might do duct mounted, blowing air on the windows. But that's something that the tool is probably not going to understand. So really, the goal is to get all of the simpler spaces, get those laid out, and allow you to focus on the more complex spaces. The parameters are the question is parameters shared or project parameters. Could we just insert your parameters into our company's custom schedules? Yes, so they are shared parameters assigned to the content that is shipped with the tool. So when you open up the tool, it opens up your shared parameter file and says, hey, do I have these shared parameters? If you don't, it adds them. If you do, it skips, and that allows you to use all those schedules to your heart's content. You could remove information, add information, whatever you want to do. Next question is, does this coordinate with electrical or fire protection systems? Yes. So not perfectly. So the problem with coordination is a lot of times electrical engineers will make a family, like they'll make like a audio, like a fire alarm, and they will put a circle on that fire alarm to show like the coverage area of that. And so when I'm looking at that to try to coordinate with that thing, it's showing me I don't have a free tile for 30 feet because of the way the family's built. So if that were so if you tried to lay this out on something where the electrical engineer had already gone through and done all these diffusers would get pushed to the corners away from all those things. So what it will do is if there's a light here, it'll step around where it's supposed to go, and it'll go one tile away. So it'll coordinate within one tile, but if it's being asked to go any more than one tile away, it'll just throw it on top of whatever's already there. So it does a first pass at coordinating, but it's definitely something that has to be looked at as you go through. Good question. I forgot to mention that. So the ceilings, the question is, do the ceilings need to be in the model or will it look at the linked model? It could be either. So in this model, these are linked ceilings, and then these are ceilings in the host, and or in they're not in the linked model. And those both work with these ceilings. Like it'll find the ceiling name whether it's linked or not. So it's either or for the ceilings. Over the same shape will it produce the same results every time? Yeah, yes, it will. So things do change as as you change your allowable CFMs, but this is gonna this is going to analyze the space in the same way every single time. Now, if I were to say that, if I were going to say, hey, let's allow 14-inch and 15-inch, so let's allow this CFM to go way higher. Now it's going to analyze it a little bit differently, because as it adds diffusers, onesie twosies, it might get under this 800 CFM before it needs to go to a 2x2. So let's see what this looks like. So now it said, hey, I don't need to go to a 2x3 grid. I can use a 15-inch with 720 CFM, and I could just go down, linear in the middle. But now notice the ceiling grid isn't perfectly aligned. So ideally, it looks like it should go here. So it's got to step it to one side. But yeah, so it'll look different as you change these numbers. But assuming all else is equal, it'll all look the same. Okay, so the question is, when you say the NUC only 165 CFM, was that NUC a separate space with the separate specified splitter throw? No. So this is all one space. All one space with just one CFM assigned to it. So what the tool does is it breaks this space down, and then it assigns the CFM in proportion to the area. So, in proportion to the area, this gets 160 CFM, and this gets all the rest. So it's basically, the equation is it's 330 CFM times this area over the total area. So you don't have to bring in separate CFM numbers. It automatically breaks down your NUCs. And that's how it works. But it just does it in proportion to the area, which is another good thing to keep in mind. If this is like a NUC full of hot plates, maybe you want to assign more CFM to this. So this assumes kind of consistent load across all of the spaces. Yes, this recording will be posted on YouTube. I'll send you guys all a link afterwards. If my supply CFM changes, will it automatically update diffuser size? No, it will not. So the reason I don't do that is because when you change the diffuser size in Revit, if you've already got ductwork attached to it, Revit will automatically throw a reducer or an expander onto that diffuser, and you may never know. Like in plan view, it looks fine. Like you've got an 8-inch running out, and you can't tell that, oh, hey, this is attached to a 10-inch now. So I prefer, if a diffuser size has to change, I prefer that to be done manually, so that you know to go and change the run out size. Because that, if you switch a diffuser from 300 to 600 CFM, it needs to go to a 10-inch. You also have to change the duct sizing. So I don't want to change it without some manual interpretation. Now, if your CFM for the space changes, delete the diffusers in the space, relay them out, do it like that. Okay, I'm gonna have to follow up with some of you guys via email. I think I need a little bit more information on some of these questions. Yeah, I think I covered everything else. If anything else comes up, feel free to shoot me an email. Hit me up on LinkedIn, however you want to do it. Yeah, so the next tools I'm going to be working on are, automated zoning, automated VAV selection. So I look forward to showing that to you guys, hopefully within the year, but that I'm always optimistic. So hope to see you guys again soon. Take care.